All right, last up in this tab 3 will be the Implementing Solutions for Transportation Research and Evaluating Emerging Technologies, or iStreet Living Lab at U of F, presented by Dr. Pruthvi Manjunatha. Get out of here. You give me a solid, or get it pretty close?
It's a pretty solid one.
All right, thank you. All right, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to present here. Before I start the presentation, a little bit of an introduction about the iStreet program. So it's an abbreviation, implementation of solutions from the transportation research and evaluating emerging technologies. So we go back to late 2016, early 2017, when Florida DOT was drafting its Connected and Autonomous Vehicles or CAV business plan. So back then, we University of Florida Transportation Institute, we sat with the DOT and the city of Gainesville. So this three-way partnership happened, and since then, it started with connected and autonomous vehicle technologies, but it's grown more broader into emerging technology program throughout the state. And when we go out and try to explain outside as to what we do, we say, we're a real world living lab or a real world test bed. So usually they say, so you have a lab. So we say, no, it's much bigger than that. Then they say, do you have a couple of streets, like a closed facility where you do testing? We say it's much bigger than that. So the map that you see, that is our test bed, that is our lab. So all the technology that we test and evaluate, so it's actually implemented in the field. So we don't look at implementation of technology for the technology's sake, but they have to address a certain underlying problem. Lives must be saved, and people and goods have to move faster and efficiently. So that's our goal. To that extent, our vision is to be the leading global living lab for transportation safety and mobility, in that order, and then to provide a unique ecosystem for public, private research and all the players within the ecosystem to make sure that the technology progresses in a meaningful way. So when it comes to the Senate Bill 1380, our responsibility was slightly broader compared to Qatar. So we were given 5-6 major bullet points to look at. So you can look at all those items there. So to tackle all those items, we come from a technology and emerging technology point of view. So while we do have access to some transit researchers and transit experts, we wanted to go out and ask the people in the field. So that included the transit expert, transit agencies, the vendors of some of the paratransit products, software providers for your phone apps, smartphone apps, and also the traditional literature. So we looked at a whole list of things that kind of informed our study approach. And based on that, we had 3 major steps for our study. So the first, we looked at what is the latest and greatest in terms of the state of the art. And then we looked at what is the state of practice in Florida, so that we have a point of comparison and see where the state is at. And we also interviewed the transit agency leads and whoever was available to make sure that what we found out it is correct and there is proper context for that. So the first step was looking at state-of-the-art review. It's a busy slide, but we can start at 12 o'clock and go clockwise. So at the top, you can see we looked at various in-cabin technologies that included occupant restraint system, in-cabin camera or monitoring systems, ramps, your panic buttons. So what has been the latest advancement in each of those, and what are the possible outcomes of those technologies? So a couple of things that I can bring up, without going into too too much details, is there is advancement in terms of automatic restraint systems. If when implemented correctly, that could save a lot of time and resources and training for the staff, and also ensure safety for the paratransit passengers. When we looked at the research regarding like in-cabin monitoring system, we found out that that was one of the things that would increase user satisfaction and user perception, thereby encouraging more people to use paratransit. And then the bill also wanted to look at the safety standards for technology installation, and if there are any best practices. There are some industry best practices when we talk to some of these camera providers and these paratransit vendors. We did get some best practices, but we could not find any safety standards as such mandated either by the state or the federal government. And when it comes to booking and tracking, so this can be through a website, through a phone app. So we looked at various apps and app designs for these booking and tracking services. We looked at what are some of the most useful features among them. And what we found out was there is international standard called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. So they have clear guidelines as to how these apps should work. Like, if you, for example, let's take a look at in this picture. So there are 3 pictures on the left, bottom left of your screen. So in the first picture, it's a screenshot of a video where someone is explaining how an app works, but there are no subtitles or captions. So if someone is deaf, they cannot understand it. And the second one is opposite. So there are captions, but there is no audio. So if you are blind and if it's not screen reader friendly, you cannot understand what's going on there. And the third one is a combination of both, so which is much more accessible than the first 2 options. It's just like one simple example, being your colors being colorblind friendly, and your fonts being big enough or bold enough or sharp enough for all kinds of people with visual disabilities. So those are some of the things. Right now we found very few agencies, even in the world, are actually looking at very closely and following those web content accessibility guidelines. And then when it comes to driver interface, there are not many agencies either nationwide or in the world that have very great driver interfaces that gives the drivers of information of who is the passenger that is coming in and what their specific needs are. And finally, there are a lot of innovative space from the non-public agency side. Like we looked at some of them, and for example, there are some apps there which are like piloted in like, for example, Handy Maps was piloted in France, Wheelie app was piloted in New York. So these are the apps which are giving like navigation directions for people with various disabilities to basically take various modes of transportation and transfer between them. So there are some pilots in the country where such apps have collaborated with transit agencies. That could be a good approach. So this was what we understood where the state of the art was. And then in the next step, what we did was we looked at state of practice in Florida. So this table kind of gives us the summary of our study. We picked 8 agencies based on our conversation with the Florida Public Transportation Agency, and we had to pick like 8 different representative agencies, and we reached out to those agencies as well to make sure that we have our data correct. And as you can see, there are 5 different measures one needs to look at when looking at transportation options, starting from availability and accessibility to acceptability, affordability, and adaptability. Because of the scope of the bill, we limited ourselves to looking at availability and accessibility, and we kind of created tier system where tier 1 represents like extensive, goes above and beyond, and then tier 2 is satisfactory, and tier 3 needs work. So based on that, we looked at transit coverage, paratransit coverage, operating hours, booking methods, tracking methods, and accessibility, like based on the web standards that I mentioned earlier, and then and overall, weighted how those agencies look at. And then this we did based on publicly available information, and then looking at the their service coverage and timetables. We also verified that information through interviews. We reached out to all of those 8 agencies that we used as a representative in our study. Out of them, five of the agencies responded back to us. Given enough time, and not having 3 hurricanes would have actually helped us get all the 8 responses, but we did our best. And based on that, these are some of the findings that we would say. So, some agencies have limited service coverage and operating hours, and I think one of the earlier speakers mentioned, funding and driver pay and other factors coming into that. And in terms of in-cabin technologies, so some of the agencies do not have cameras and in-cabin monitoring systems, and some of them, as mentioned earlier, contract it out to a different provider. They don't have much say in that, and there are no safety standards when it comes to installation of some of these technologies. And then when it comes to booking and tracking, so the more booking channels you provide, the more likely someone is to use such a system. But not all the agencies have all the booking methods. Some of them might just have a phone number that you call, and then you just wait. You don't know when the service is going to come to you, and you don't know what's the expectation. So as Mr. Katalin mentioned earlier, if you have a tracking system and shows time of arrival and that kind of information, so the reliability of the service usually helps the passengers. And then on the operator side as well, the more information the operator or the driver has, the better they can help. We also looked at what are the data security measures the agencies take to make sure that their data is protected. Generally speaking, we found that they follow very good standards, like having firewalls and VPNs and password protected software, and they also use, a lot of the agencies use role-based access system. That means not everybody has access to everything, which is kind of important from a data security angle. So based on that, our recommendations are, make sure that there's extended service coverage so everybody uses the system. At least make sure that there are in-cabin monitoring or camera-based systems, and automatic occupant restraint system are the advancements that are coming in that could be taken a look at. And then there's no statewide safety standards or best practices right now for technologies that goes inside the paratransit, except the fact that they have to meet the ADA requirements. So it would be good to take a look at that. And then the more the venues for booking service, the more likely are people to use it. And then tracking apps increase reliability. And then operator interfaces, a lot of the drivers right now, they barely have any information, so the more information they get, the better it is. Again, this study was very limited in the scope that we only looked at accessibility and availability, looking at affordability and acceptability. For example, acceptability meaning how frequent the service are stops appropriately located and things like that, and those things need to be studied in detail as to make sure that first where the additional dollar needs to be sent, and other than that, where the dollar is already being spent, is it being spent wisely? And then, earlier speakers also mentioned, there are supplementary services through transportation network companies like, voucher programs and things like that. So are they, effective and things like that? Coming from an emerging technology program, so I have been in touch with a lot of, operators who are in the space of, autonomous vehicles and autonomous shuttles. And, Florida has been very, in the forefront of those technologies. So do innovations like that have a role in addressing this population? That is also something that needs to be studied. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Are there any questions? All right. So I have one and a bit of a follow-up. So recognizing the state's got limited funding, we know there's a potential for a little bit down budget year this year as well. How would you recommend we prioritize additional resources for the TD program?
That's a good question. Based on our recommendation, at least I would say, just to make sure that the current systems are optimally utilized, I think providing those, tracking applications and increasing the reliability of services, any technology and value addition that could make sure that the existing systems are being utilized, I think that would be a good start.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I've been asked about in-camera systems. What are those costs? What are the feasibility of those, do you think, here?
We didn't look at the exact cost, but they're relatively cheap when it comes to like some of the other systems out there. Yeah.
Okay, all right. If you can, just send examples, please, and cost.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and at some point I would like to come see what you're doing as well. I think they'd be incredibly interesting.